The emergency alarm in Dr. Marcus Rivera's environmental suit screamed warnings about toxic atmospheric readings, but he ignored them. Something massive had crashed through the crystalline forest of Zephyria 7, leaving a trail of destruction that led to what appeared to be a dying giant. Marcus found the creature collapsed in a crater of shattered crystal formations. It was a shadow claw, one of the most feared apex predators in this sector of the galaxy. The beast measured nearly 20 feet from snout to tail, its obsidian hide, normally gleaming like polished armor. But now that magnificent body was broken and bleeding, its breathing so shallow it was barely detectable. The shadow claw had been poisoned. Marcus could see the telltale signs of viridian toxin coursing through its system, turning its natural bioluminescent markings a sickly green. Massive wounds covered its flanks where other predators had taken advantage of its weakened state. This was no ordinary injury. This creature was minutes away from death. Every regulation, every survival protocol, every piece of common sense told Marcus to walk away. Shadow claws were responsible for the deaths of dozens of colonists. They were unstoppable killing machines with retractable claws that could slice through titanium and jaws powerful enough to crush vehicles. The Colonial Handbook's advice for encountering one was simple: run and pray. Instead, Marcus activated his emergency beacon and called for his mobile medical unit. He couldn't explain the compulsion that drove him to save this dying predator, but something deep in his scientist's heart refused to let such a magnificent creature perish. Working frantically, Marcus administered emergency antitoxins directly into the creature's bloodstream. The Shadow Claw's eyes flickered open briefly, revealing intelligence behind the pain before closing again. Its vital signs were crashing fast. Marcus had perhaps an hour before irreversible organ failure set in. The mobile unit arrived, just as the creature's breathing stopped entirely. Marcus immediately began artificial respiration, forcing oxygen into the alien's massive lungs while simultaneously injecting cardiac stimulants. For terrifying minutes, nothing happened. Then, finally, a weak heartbeat returned. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He couldn't treat injuries this severe in the field. Against every protocol, he loaded the unconscious predator into his transport and rushed it to his private research facility hidden in the mountains. For the next 72 hours, Marcus didn't sleep. He set up life support systems, performed emergency surgery with improvised tools, and fed the creature intravenously with nutrient solutions. The Shadow Claw teetered between life and death, multiple times, each crisis requiring Marcus to improvise new treatments. On the third day, something remarkable happened. The creature's eyes opened and focused directly on Marcus. There was no aggression, no predatory instinct, only recognition, and what could only be described as gratitude. The Shadow Claw tried to move but was still too weak. Marcus gently placed his hand on the creature's massive head. "Easy there, big guy," Marcus whispered. "You're safe now. I'm going to call you Vex." Vex made a soft rumbling sound, almost like a purr. Over the following weeks, Marcus continued the intensive care. He hand-fed the recovering predator, changed its bandages, and slowly helped it regain strength. Each day, the bond between them grew stronger. Marcus began to notice something extraordinary in Vex's behavior. The creature's eyes followed his every movement with protective intensity. When other researchers occasionally visited the facility, Vex would position itself between them and Marcus, a low warning growl rumbling in its chest. By the end of the first month, Vex had made a complete physical recovery, but something had fundamentally changed in the predator's nature. It no longer behaved like a wild creature. It had bonded with the human who had saved its life. And that bond ran deeper than either species had ever experienced before. Marcus had no idea that he had just created the most loyal and dangerous guardian in the galaxy. 2 months after nursing Vex back from death's door, Marcus had established a routine that defied every xenobiological protocol ever written. Each morning, he would arrive at his hidden facility to find the massive Shadow Claw waiting by the entrance, those intelligent amber eyes tracking his every movement with unwavering devotion. Vex had grown even larger during recovery, now standing 8 feet tall at the shoulder when fully upright. The creature's obsidian hide had regained its natural luster, and the bioluminescent patterns along its spine pulsed with healthy blue light. But the most remarkable change wasn't physical. It was behavioral. The apex predator that once terrorized entire colonies now followed Marcus around like a devoted companion. When Marcus worked at his research station, Vex would settle nearby, always positioning itself between him and any potential entrance points. The creature had learned Marcus's schedule so precisely that it would bring him water containers when he forgot to hydrate, and even retrieved tools that fell from his workbench. "You're not supposed to be this intelligent," Marcus murmured one afternoon as Vex carefully handed him a delicate sensor array that had rolled under equipment. The colonial report said shadow claws were just mindless killing machines. Vex responded with a series of soft clicks and purrs that Marcus had begun to recognize as the creature's attempt at communication. Over weeks of interaction, he had identified over 30 distinct vocalizations, each seeming to convey different meanings. The peaceful routine shattered when Dr. James Kellerman arrived unannounced at the facility. Kellerman was the colonial administrator's chief xenobiologist, an ambitious man who had always resented Marcus's independent research status. "Rivera!" Kellerman shouted as he entered the main lab. "I know what you're hiding out here. The missing medical supplies, the unauthorized use of colonial equipment." He never finished the sentence. Vex materialized between them with liquid grace, 18 feet of pure predatory menace. The creature's bioluminescent patterns flared bright red, a warning display Marcus had never seen before. Every muscle in Vex's powerful frame was coiled for violence, claws extending with metallic clicks. The growl that emerged from Vex's throat was unlike anything Marcus had heard before. It was the sound of barely contained fury, a promise of swift and brutal death for anyone who threatened. His savior, Kellerman, went white, stumbling backward as he realized he was staring at the galaxy's most efficient killer. "Call it off, Rivera," Kellerman gasped, his voice cracking with terror. "That thing will kill us both." "Vex, stand down," Marcus said, calmly, placing a gentle hand on the creature's flank. Immediately, the Shadowclaw's posture relaxed, though its eyes never left Kellerman. "He's not a threat." What happened next demonstrated the true depth of their bond. Vex didn't retreat or back away. Instead, the creature moved to stand directly behind Marcus, its massive form looming protectively over him. The message was unmistakable. Harm this human, and face the consequences. Kellerman's shock transformed into something approaching awe. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Shadowclaws don't form pack bonds. They don't show loyalty to anything, except territory." "Vex isn't just any Shadowclaw," Marcus replied. "I saved his life, and he remembers. More than that, he's chosen to stay." Over the following hour, Marcus carefully explained his situation to Kellerman while Vex maintained watchful guard. The creature allowed the other human to remain, but never relaxed its vigilance. Every few minutes, Vex would check on Marcus, with gentle touches or soft vocalizations ensuring his human was unharmed. Kellerman documented everything with scientific fascination, but Marcus could see the wheels turning in the administrator's mind. A tamed Shadowclaw represented unprecedented possibilities for colonial expansion and defense. It also represented enormous profit potential for the right interests. "This changes everything, Rivera," Kellerman said as he prepared to leave. "The Colonial Board needs to know about this immediately. The military applications alone—" "No," Marcus interrupted, firmly. "Vex isn't a weapon. He's not property to be exploited." Kellerman's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice in this matter. That creature belongs to the colony now." As if sensing the threat in those words, Vex rose to his full height, behind Marcus. The creature's claws extended once more and those intelligent eyes fixed on Kellerman with predatory focus. The message was crystal clear. Anyone who tried to separate Vex from Marcus would face the full fury of a grateful predator. Kellerman left quickly after that, but Marcus knew their peaceful isolation was ending. Word would spread about the tamed, Shadowclaw, and others would come. Some would want to study Vex, others to capture him, and still others to eliminate what they saw as a dangerous aberration. That night, as Vex settled into his customary guard position by the facility entrance, Marcus realized their bond had awakened something profound in both species. He had saved more than just a dying creature. He had discovered that even the galaxy's most feared predators were capable of love, loyalty, and gratitude. Unfortunately, he had also created the most dangerous guardian imaginable, one whose protective instincts were about to be tested by forces that neither of them could yet imagine. 3 weeks after Kellerman's visit, Marcus's worst fears materialized in the form of 6 heavily armed mercenaries surrounding his research facility. Through his security monitors, he watched them deploy military-grade weaponry and thermal scanners. These weren't colonial officials, they were corporate hunters, the kind hired to eliminate problems quietly and permanently. "Target confirmed inside the structure," crackled a voice over their communication system. "Orders are to neutralize both the researcher and the specimen. No survivors." Marcus felt ice flow through his veins. Someone had put a kill contract on both him and Vex. The creature was nowhere to be seen, having left earlier that morning for his daily territorial patrol. For the first time since their bond formed, Marcus was truly alone and defenseless. The mercenaries moved with professional precision, breaching the facility's outer defenses within minutes. Marcus barricaded himself in the main lab, frantically trying to reach the colonial emergency frequency. But sophisticated jamming equipment blocked all communications. He was cut off from any hope of rescue. "Dr. Rivera?" called the team leader, through the reinforced door. "We know you're in there. Come out peacefully and we'll make this quick. Otherwise we'll burn you out." Marcus pressed himself against the lab's rear wall, his heart hammering. Through the transparent aluminum window, he could see the mercenaries setting up plasma charges. In moments, his makeshift fortress would become his tomb. That's when the screaming started. The first mercenary vanished between one heartbeat and the next, snatched into the shadows beyond the facility's perimeter lights. His terrified shouts cut off abruptly in a wet final sound. The remaining 5 spun toward the darkness, weapons raised, but found nothing except empty night. "Contact! Contact!" shouted the team leader. "Unknown hostile in the perimeter." A second mercenary simply disappeared, his weapon clattering to the ground as something massive and silent dragged him into the crystalline formations. The remaining 4 formed a defensive circle, their enhanced vision scanning frantically for threats. Then Vex emerged from the shadows, and Marcus witnessed fury incarnate. The Shadow Claw moved like liquid death, his obsidian hide reflecting the facility's emergency lights as he flowed between the crystal formations. Every movement was precise, calculated, and absolutely lethal. This wasn't the gentle companion who brought Marcus water and tools. This was the apex predator that had evolved to be the perfect killer. The mercenaries opened fire, plasma bolts, searing the air where Vex had been milliseconds before. But the creature moved with impossible speed, using the crystal formations as cover while closing the distance with his prey. His bioluminescent patterns blazed crimson with rage, painting the battlefield in hellish light. "What is that thing?" one mercenary screamed as Vex's claws sliced through his partner's armor like paper. The man's death was instantaneous, but Vex didn't pause. The creature's fury was focused on one single purpose: eliminating every threat to Marcus. The team leader tried to fall back to a defensive position, but Vex anticipated the movement. The Shadow Claw burst from concealment with a roar that shattered several crystal formations, launching himself at the remaining mercenaries with berserker rage. His claws found their marks with surgical precision, while his powerful jaws crushed weapons and armor with equal ease. Marcus watched in horrified fascination as his gentle companion transformed into an unstoppable force of destruction. Vex wasn't just killing the mercenaries, he was annihilating them with extreme prejudice, ensuring that none would survive to threaten Marcus again. The creature's protective instincts had evolved into something beyond mere loyalty. This was primal, absolute devotion expressed through violence. The last mercenary managed to wound Vex with a lucky plasma shot, burning through the creature's hide near his left shoulder. The injury only seemed to enrage the Shadowclaw further. Vex's response was swift and brutal, his claws opening the mercenary from throat to sternum in a single fluid motion. Silence fell over the facility like a burial shroud. 6 professional killers lay dead, their blood staining the crystal formations while Vex stood over their bodies, chest heaving with exertion. The creature's bioluminescent patterns slowly faded from rage red back to their normal blue glow. Then, as if a switch had been thrown, Vex transformed once again. The killer vanished, replaced by the concerned companion who immediately began checking the facility for signs of damage or additional threats. Only when he was satisfied that no danger remained did Vex approach the lab where Marcus waited. The massive Shadowclaw settled beside the reinforced door and made soft chirping sounds, the same gentle vocalizations he used to greet Marcus each morning. The contrast was staggering. Minutes ago, this creature had been an engine of destruction. Now he waited patiently for his human to emerge, ready to offer comfort and protection. Marcus stepped outside on shaking legs, surveying the carnage. 6 trained killers had been eliminated with surgical efficiency by a creature whose only motivation was protecting the human who had saved his life. The bond between them had created something unprecedented, a predator whose fury was entirely devoted to safeguarding his savior. Vex approached slowly, careful not to startle Marcus with any sudden movements. The creature nuzzled against him gently, seeking reassurance that his human was unharmed. Marcus ran his hands over Vex's massive head, marveling at the contradiction of such lethal power combined with tender devotion. "Thank you," Marcus whispered into the creature's ear. "You saved my life." Vex responded with contented purrs, but his eyes remained alert, scanning the perimeter for new threats. The Shadowclaw had tasted battle in defense of his human, and that experience had awakened something deeper in his protective instincts. Marcus realized with both gratitude and growing concern that Vex would kill anyone who posed even the slightest threat to their bond. He had nursed a dying predator back to life, and in return, had gained a guardian whose fury knew no limits when defending his savior. The aftermath of the mercenary massacre brought unwanted attention from across the galaxy. Within days, Marcus's facility was under surveillance by corporate scouts, military observers, and worst of all, representatives from Apex Dynamics, the galaxy's most ruthless bioweapons corporation. They had heard about the tamed Shadowclaw and wanted Vex for their genetic modification programs. Marcus tried to maintain their normal routine, but Vex's behavior had changed dramatically since the attack. The creature no longer left the facility for territorial patrols. Instead, he maintained constant vigilance, his enhanced senses detecting threats long before they became visible. The gentle companion was still there, but now he was overlaid with the hyper-vigilant instincts of a professional bodyguard. "You're making yourself sick with worry," Marcus told Vex as the creature paced the facility's perimeter for the 100th time that day. "I'm safe here with you," Vex responded with agitated clicking sounds, his bioluminescent patterns flickering between blue and amber, a sign of stress Marcus had learned to recognize. The Shadowclaw knew something was coming, and his protective instincts were reaching dangerous levels of intensity. The corporate strike team arrived 3 days later, but this time they came prepared. 12 soldiers in powered armor, armed with neural disruptors, specifically designed to incapacitate apex predators. Their leader, Colonel Brass, announced their presence over external speakers. "Dr. Rivera, this is Colonel Brass of Apex Dynamics Security. You're harboring corporate property. Surrender the specimen, and you'll be compensated for your research. Refuse, and we'll take it by force." Marcus stepped outside, positioning himself between the soldiers and the facility where Vex waited. "That creature isn't property. He's a sentient being who chose to stay with me." "Sentient or not, it's worth 50 million credits to the right buyers," Brass replied. "Stand aside, Doctor. This doesn't have to involve you." That's when Vex emerged from the facility and Marcus felt his blood chill. The Shadowclaw's entire demeanor radiated barely contained violence. His claws were fully extended, his bioluminescent patterns blazing crimson, and a low rumble emanated from his throat like distant thunder. But this wasn't the focused fury he had shown against the mercenaries. This was something far more dangerous. Neural disruptors, maximum setting, Brass ordered. Bring it down. The weapons fired simultaneously, sending waves of electromagnetic energy designed to disrupt neural function. Any normal creature would have collapsed instantly. Vex staggered briefly, shook his massive head, then let out a roar that shattered every piece of glass in the facility. The neural disruptors had failed, but they had done something worse. They had caused Vex pain. And causing pain to the creature in front of the human he was sworn to protect triggered something primal in his protective programming. Vex's wrath was no longer calculated or surgical. It was pure, elemental fury. The Shadow Claw moved through the corporate soldiers like a force of nature. Powered armor that could stop plasma rounds crumpled under his claws like paper. Neural disruptors were torn from hands and crushed before they could fire again. But what terrified Marcus most was the systematic way Vex was working. He wasn't just defending anymore, he was hunting. "Fall back! Fall back!" Brass screamed as his men were picked off one by one. But Vex had entered a state of protective rage that wouldn't end until every threat to Marcus was eliminated. The creature moved with impossible speed, his obsidian hide reflecting muzzle flashes as he closed in on his prey. Marcus watched in horror as his gentle companion became something out of nightmares. Vex's fury had evolved beyond mere protection into active threat elimination. The creature was no longer content to wait for enemies to come to them. He was actively hunting down anyone who posed even potential danger to his human. "Vex, stop!" Marcus shouted, running after the creature as he pursued the fleeing soldiers into the crystal formations. "You've won! They're retreating!" But Vex couldn't hear him over the roar of his own protective instincts. The Shadow Claw had identified these beings as threats to Marcus, and his programming demanded their complete elimination. Mercy was not part of his emotional vocabulary when his human safety was at stake. It took 3 hours for Vex to hunt down the last of the corporate soldiers. When he finally returned to the facility, his obsidian hide was splattered with evidence of his work. But the moment he saw Marcus, the killer vanished once again, replaced by the concerned companion, who immediately began checking his human for injuries. Marcus stared at the creature who had just single-handedly eliminated an entire corporate strike team. Vex's devotion had transformed into something beyond loyalty. It was becoming an obsession that threatened to consume both of them. "What have I created?" Marcus whispered as Vex settled beside him, purring contentedly now that all threats had been eliminated. The answer came to him with chilling clarity. He had saved a dying predator and earned its eternal gratitude. But, in doing so, he had awakened protective instincts so powerful that Vex would kill anyone and everyone who posed even the slightest threat to their bond. The creature he had nursed back to life now protected him with a fury that knew no limits, no mercy, and no end. Marcus realized with growing dread that their bond was becoming as dangerous to the galaxy as it was precious to them both. As reports of the corporate massacre spread across the communication networks, Marcus knew that bigger threats were coming. And when they arrived, Vex's wrath would be waiting for them with the patience of a hunter and the fury of a guardian whose devotion bordered on divine madness. The final confrontation came at dawn, when the twin suns of Zephyria 7 painted the crystal formations in shades of gold and crimson. Marcus had known this day would arrive ever since word of Vex's capabilities spread throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Defense Force had declared both him and Vex to be threats to colonial security, and a full military task force was descending on their location. 50 warships hung in orbit above the planet, their weapons trained on the research facility. General Hayes, the task force commander, had made his intentions clear through subspace communication. Either Marcus would surrender Vex for termination, or they would glass the entire region from orbit. "You have 1 hour to comply, Dr. Rivera." Hayes' voice crackled through the facility's speakers. "That creature has become a galactic threat. It must be destroyed." Marcus stood beside Vex in the facility's main chamber, running his hands through the creature's obsidian hide. The Shadow Claw sensed the approaching danger, his bioluminescent patterns shifting between blue and amber in agitated waves. But there was something different in his demeanor today. a calmness that Marcus had never seen before. "I won't let them hurt you," Marcus whispered to his companion. "We'll find another way." Vex turned his massive head toward Marcus, those intelligent, amber eyes holding depths of understanding that transcended species barriers. The creature made soft chirping sounds, the same gentle vocalizations he had used during his recovery months ago. But now Marcus heard something else in those sounds. Goodbye. The orbital bombardment began exactly 1 hour later. Lance beams of concentrated energy struck the crystal formations around the facility, turning ancient mineral structures into clouds of superheated plasma. The message was clear. Surrender was no longer an option. This was extermination. Vex rose to his full height, his bioluminescent patterns blazing with unprecedented intensity. But instead of the crimson fury Marcus had come to expect, the patterns showed deep blue mixed with silver, colors Marcus had never seen before. The creature was preparing for something beyond mere battle. Atmospheric fighters screamed down from orbit, their weapons painting the landscape with destruction. Drop pods began landing in the distance, disgorging hundreds of battle-suited Marines equipped with every weapon science could devise for killing apex predators. "Stay inside," Marcus told Vex desperately. "Let me try to negotiate with them. There has to be another way." But Vex gently pushed Marcus back with one massive paw, a gesture filled with tender protectiveness. The creature's eyes met his human's one final time, conveying everything that words could never express. Love, gratitude, devotion, and now, sacrifice. Vex stepped outside the facility and let out a roar that shook the planet itself. What followed was beyond warfare. It was legend in the making. Vex moved through the attacking forces like a living weapon of mass destruction. But with a purpose Marcus didn't immediately understand. The creature wasn't just killing the soldiers. He was drawing their attention, making himself the primary target while staying far enough from the facility to keep Marcus safe. Plasma beams seared Vex's hide as he danced between crystal formations, leading hundreds of Marines on a deadly chase through the mineral maze. His fury was absolute, his precision perfect, but Marcus could see the creature was taking tremendous damage. Energy weapons left smoking wounds across his obsidian plates, and his movements were slowing with each passing minute. "He's protecting me," Marcus realized with dawning horror. "He's drawing them away so they won't target the facility." The orbital bombardment intensified, turning the crystal forest into a hellscape of molten rock and superheated atmosphere. But Vex continued his deadly dance, eliminating threats while leading the military forces farther and farther from Marcus's location. The creature's protective instincts had evolved one final time, from defending his human to sacrificing himself to ensure Marcus's survival. General Hayes himself descended in a command dropship, armed with experimental weapons designed specifically for this confrontation. The general's personal guard carried molecular disruptors capable of breaking down Vex's crystalline hide at the atomic level. The final battle took place in a clearing of shattered crystal spires where Vex made his last stand. The creature was bleeding from dozens of wounds, his bioluminescent patterns flickering weakly, but his fury burned as bright as ever. Even dying, he was the most magnificent predator Marcus had ever seen. "Target acquired," Hayes announced as his weapons locked onto Vex, terminating hostile specimen. The molecular disruptors fired simultaneously, their beams converging on Vex's position. The creature's roar of defiance echoed across the battlefield as the weapons began breaking down his molecular structure. But even as he died, Vex's eyes remained fixed on the distant facility where Marcus waited, ensuring to his final breath that his human remained safe. Marcus felt the exact moment when Vex's life ended. The bond between them had grown so strong that the creature's death tore through his consciousness like a physical wound. He collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the loss of the most loyal companion any being had ever known. Hours later, when the smoke cleared and the military forces had withdrawn, Marcus emerged from his facility to find Vex's remains crystallized into the planet's mineral matrix. The creature's sacrifice had literally become part of Zephyria 7's landscape, a monument to devotion that would endure for millions of years. General Hayes approached Marcus with something resembling respect. "Your creature eliminated over 300 soldiers before we brought it down. In all our files, we've never seen anything fight with such determination." "He wasn't fighting for territory or survival," Marcus replied, tears streaming down his face. "He was fighting for love." As news of Vex's sacrifice spread throughout the galaxy, something unexpected happened. Other researchers began reporting similar bonds with rescued alien creatures. The story of the human who nursed a predator back to life, and the creature who protected him with ultimate fury, became legend. Marcus established the Vex Foundation, dedicated to fostering understanding between species through compassion rather than conquest. His research proved that bonds of loyalty and love could transcend any biological barrier, creating connections stronger than military alliances or corporate contracts. Years later, standing before Vex's crystallized remains, Marcus would tell visitors about the greatest lesson his companion had taught him. True fury isn't born from hatred or aggression. It comes from love so pure and complete that it will sacrifice everything to protect what it holds most dear. The predator he had nursed back to life had protected him with fury beyond measure, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy that even the most savage creatures were capable of the most sublime devotion.